What we'll do is we'll finish this episode and then we'll start that part 2. How's that sound? Sure. All right. Well, stay tuned. Braden, stay tuned. Oh no, you won't. You won't because you won't listen to yourself on this.
No, I'm experiencing.
Welcome back to the Chip Lunch Podcast.
Thank you.
Don't expect high maintenance. That's a reference to something we were just talking about before we started recording, but you'll have to come to the studio if you want to hear such gems and nuggets as that. Welcome back, Braden.
Welcome back, Joel.
You didn't change since last week.
Same clothes as last week.
Looking quite army today.
Am I?
And like I said in the last episode, I'm reading a lot about World War II at the moment.
Okay.
And I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
I still want to get one of those like flying jackets.
Oh, like a proper bomber jacket.
Yeah, like
or a
with
leather one.
Yeah, leather, but then the like the sheepskin in the
hood.
hood.
The shearling.
Oh, I don't know. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think that looks cool.
It does look very cool.
Anyway, watch out for my military-inspired pieces now. Welcome back, Dave.
Thanks, Joel. It's good.
Doing okay so
Yes,
far. I'm just sitting here listening to all the stories. I'm really enjoying it. So,
thank you.
and thank you again. It's been really good. So let's kick off this episode with 6 months of Bible college, Capernwray.
Capernwray.
Yes. So 6 months long enough, do you think?
Well, it wasn't for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
So Capernwray is an organisation that has Bible schools throughout the world, and there's one in Moss Vale in Australia. And the Capernwray one is the major one. And they do a 6 month Bible study course over winter.
Yep.
And then they have a break, and then they do a completely unrelated 2 month course in spring. So you can do both. You can do one or the other, back to back or over a period of years. And it taught me. I packed up my car. Dad took me up to the Bible college, and I moved in, and it's an old country house up near the Lake District, and massive stables, and the stables had been converted into dormitories. Oh. And all of a sudden I was with 10 people from all over the world, sleeping, eating, living together. And I think there's about 150 of us all up. And I made some really good friends. And I started on the adventure of a lifetime, thinking, as I said before, that Christianity was only for the old and that my life would be boring. Little did I know. And I learned all these things about God that I had no idea. And I learned things about myself and others through living in a community that was just 24/7. We lived, we laughed, we cried, we shared, and we were taught various books of the Bible. And the first lot of lessons was on the person and ministry of the Holy Spirit. And I think, who? And this was the missing link, And we would have 3 hours of lectures in the morning, and then most nights 2 hours of lectures. And we had afternoons free for personal study and for recreation and for ministry. And so I arrived there in September, and just having 6 months to study God's word and to be with God's people just transformed my life. And I'm not sure about some of the other things that I learned about. They were very, very premillennialism. And one old guy talked about the Russian army of horses coming across Europe, so that the radar didn't detect the horses, and Christ was going to come, and he was going to do this, and he was going to do that, and I got a bit confused with some of those things.
That's understandable.
So I just thought, well, while you're here, just get what you can. Yeah. And I learnt so much about the Bible that I thought I'm going to do spring school too.
Yeah.
And I was just getting ready to come home for the end of the first semester of winter school, and they asked me if I'd like to work on staff. What? And so I worked on staff over Christmas with families who'd come for a Christmas teaching, and I would coordinate the program, and others would teach. And then I went home for a couple of weeks, and some of my friends, there's a lot of Canadians and Americans there, and some of my American friends, Canadian friends came and stayed at our place, which was really good. And my mum cooked up a storm, and all these different things. And then we went back. And for the second term, I was in a completely different room, but still with 9 other guys. And, we had 2 toilets and 2 showers and there was 10 in our room and 10 in the next room in the stables. So the living conditions weren't too great, but it was all part of the growing, I think. And then I absorbed as much as I could, and I found the teachings on the Holy Spirit really, really opened my eyes and opened my life to live in the light of the resurrected Jesus was just something else. And we had to go on mission, and I shared a little bit about my brethren past, and this guy was from the church in Nazarene, and we had to go there every Sunday night for the 6 months we were there. And I think he was convinced that I wasn't a Christian, and I couldn't. I was just able to answer all of his questions from what I was learning at Bible school. So it was just really an eye opener, and as I said, community living. And all these different people, different cultures. And I was finishing up, and I decided that I was going to do spring school. And they asked me if I would stay and work with guests, because when it's not a Bible school, they have holiday centres and camps and all different things for all these people. I thought, God, you want me to do this? I used to be shy, and now I think I'm quite outgoing, and that was one of the things that really changed me, because I was working with different people, and I was trying to apply and teach what I'd learned, and every week for the summer we had 120 different guests, and seeing people come to Jesus just was a buzz, It was just great. And seeing all these young kids, and then some of them, and I tried to write them, and I've lost touch with them now, but some of them wrote me and how that week had changed their lives. And I thought, I can relate to this.
Yeah.
And so, and then I started to think, God, what have you got ahead for me?
Yeah.
And I just had this real clear thing that I wasn't going back to Stafford. I didn't know why. I didn't know what. But during Bible school, a certain blonde from Winnipeg, Manitoba had got my attention, and we started to get serious. And she stayed and did spring school, and we got more serious. And on top of all the teaching and all the learning, we decided to get engaged, and I was going to go to Canada. So after that all finished, she went to Switzerland and worked for CEF, which is a Child Evangelism Fellowship, and I stayed at Capernwray for another till the end of the year. I was originally going to stay for a year, and I did maintenance work and farm work, and every time there was guests and stuff, I did that. And so I got quite a bit of experience working with youth while I was there, but also families. And I found I really enjoyed the pastoral ministry. And anyway, my fiance came back from Switzerland. We spent some time together in Stafford, and then she went to Winnipeg. And I flew over to Winnipeg to meet her folks and stayed there. It was a real different experience. You go from an English winter to a Canadian winter, and her parents were farmers, and in just outside of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and snow everywhere. And I met their family, and I had to leave the country in order to be accepted as an immigrant. So I did all my application when I was there, and then she took it in after I'd left the country. And I was accepted as an immigrant, and I finished up at Capernwray. I spent some time with my family and said all my goodbyes and jumped on a plane and went to Winnipeg. And we spent our time sorting out, I was looking for work. I lived with her parents for a while, and they were really, really good to me. And I worked, a job fell into my hands eventually, and we fixed the date, we sent all the invitations out. And her father worked at the same place that I did, and so did one of her brothers. And we worked for a company called Reimer Express Lines, which was a major trucking company across the Canadian and American border. And I started off in the stores, and then I started washing trucks. And freezing cold. Winnipeg was the coldest winter they'd had for 100 years. My first winter, I thought, thanks God, what perfect timing. And it was just freezing. It never went above zero for 100 days. And they'd say, today's high is going to be minus 24 degrees. And you think,
yes.
Something to look forward to. And the coldest day I was ever...
24.
The coldest day I was ever there was minus 42 with a wind chill of minus 66. And because when I first moved to Canada, I had no idea. And I had fairly long hair, and I washed my hair and went out, and it all froze. So I had to go sit there in the car with the heater on, and
like snap a piece off.
yeah, snap it. You don't go for a haircut, you go for a snip, there's a snap. And I washed trucks, and they were so frozen, and had all this ice on it, that I hosed them down with boiling water. So that the mechanics could work on them. And it was really good money. It needed to be. And I was saving up to get married and stuff like that. And I bought a car, and everything was going so sweet. And my mum and dad and my brother and his wife were coming over for the wedding. And then she ran off with another guy.
Oh,
jeez.
And I thought, what do I do? God, you better be really real to me now. And for the first time in my life, I felt let down by God, because I'd worked all this through, that it was a thing to do. But fortunately, her parents stood by me, and I moved in with them for a while. And then her father said, leave it with me. I'll sort this out. She'll be marrying you. And then about 3 days later, he came back and he said, look, she's not going to marry you, and I'm really sorry. And so here I was, stuck in no man's land, really. Mum and dad and family were on their way for the wedding, and I just had to put my life back together, which I didn't know how to at first. My immediate thing to do when things had gone wrong was to rebel, but I just thought, God, this isn't right, but I just don't know what to do. I moved in with her brother and another guy, and we rented a townhouse, and I'd got some Christian friends in Winnipeg, and I tried to touch base with them, and about 12 months later, I thought, oh, I'll go to England and then I'll come back and save up some money and I'll travel across Canada and then I'll go to America. And I thought, then I'll come back to Canada and I'll either settle here or I'll go back to England. And I thought, I don't want to go back to England. So I'll try my hardest to make a go of it here.
Yeah.
So I worked, saved up, and one day I just felt, God, I need to get out of here. I need to get a new start. There's too much here that's holding me back. I still have my faith, but I just felt I wasn't living effectively, and I just needed to get out. I was involved in Mennonite Brethren, so that was an experience, and they all spoke Low German. And when I was together with my fiance, that she was Mennonite, and at the family get-togethers, there'd be about 30 aunts and uncles, and they all spoke German, and so I learned a little bit of Low German. But not much, and I couldn't communicate and stuff. And and I thought, all my friends are inherited. The other ones that I met at Bible college are all cemented in their lives. I'm going to go somewhere. And so I thought, God, what am I going to do? So I resigned my job, chucked everything that I owned in the back of my Chevy and drove.
Yeah.
And I'd got a mate in Lethbridge, which is south of Calgary. And his parents opened the door to me, and I went to church in Calgary. And I said I'd been a Christian, but I didn't know where I was going. And I went to church, and they said that it was summer, and it was great. And they said they needed counsellors at... this is Craig Mark II, at Pioneer Ranch Camps.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so anybody who was interested could go. And I thought, well, I got 2 weeks. I don't need to get a job yet.
Yeah.
And so I went, and I said to the guy, his name was Don Pasterski, and he was from Toronto, and he worked with pioneers. And this was in Sundre, in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. You wake up every morning and you see the Rocky Mountains, and it's just, fantastic. And I told him my life story, and he said, oh, you can come here, you're welcome here. And so I worked as a counsellor. I taught kids canoeing and horse riding, and we went on a hike in the Rocky Mountains, and I did that for 10 days with one bunch of kids, and we stayed in log cabins, and it was just, I thought, God, this isn't boring, thank you. And I had the time of my life. And then they said, oh, can you stay for another 2 weeks? So I stayed for the next, yeah, you bet. Yeah. So I stayed for another 2 weeks, and I'd always attracted difficult people, and this one kid was really, really quite different. Some were from really wealthy homes, and some were from really poor homes. And I picked up that this kid had got a few mental issues. And one day I was just really thinking, what is going on with him? So I followed him, and he went into his hut, and we weren't supposed to go in the huts, except, there was always something on, that we were either doing the Bible study, in our huts, or we were doing something outside. And so I just hung around for a few minutes, and then I started to smell something. And I thought, oh, there's a bushfire somewhere. And I opened the door, and he's setting fire to this cabin. Turns out he's a pyromaniac. The temptation was too good for him. So I quickly panicked, got him out, managed to put the fire out, managed to get help. And I just sensed that God had really used me in that. And as I say, I had a fantastic time, and we'd camped out overnight one night, and I'd sat around the campsite, and we told ghost stories. And then about we had to have camp names, and my name was Ringo, after Ringo Starr. There's a guy called Skunk. I won't tell you how he got his name. And we were camping, and I said, okay, we need to go to bed. And we got into our makeshift tents, and then we heard something, and they said, Ringo, he's here. I said, who's here? The bogeyman. The bogeyman's come to get us. And I listened, and then I heard a distant growl. And I thought, oh, what is this? And we'd kept all our food away from the campsite. And the next morning, when I got up, there was bear prints and bear claws all over the camp. All that. I thought, oh. And I said to him, don't worry, mate, it wasn't the bogeyman, it was a bear. It was a bear.
It was a bear.
And so I had a fantastic month putting into practice what I'd learned and sharing and working with these kids. And they said, I'd done senior boys, and they said to me, do you want to go to junior girls? I said, oh, yeah. What would I do? And they said, oh, the same as you've done here, except you don't sleep in a cabin. And I said, I'd rather do junior boys. And okay, so I did junior boys for another month. And we moved to a town called Sundry, which again was in the Rocky Mountains. And first day, I noticed this girl. And second day, I noticed that she was at every table where I was for meals. And I thought, God, what the heck are you doing? I'm not interested in women. The last thing I want.
Given the previous experience. Yep.
I've been left at the altar. You know, I just thought, oh, no. And dealing with that, the lack of confidence, the loss of self-esteem, the hurt, and I was going well. I was enjoying my life.
Yeah, you know? Like last time everything was going well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after a couple of days, this girl that she was friends with kept putting her up to being at every table where I was. And after the first camp, I just said, how come you're always at the same table? And I basically said, oh, and she was a really shy girl. You know, she's a missionary kid. She'd grown up, her parents had grown up or her mother had grown up in China, and met her dad, who's Australian, and she'd grown up in Malaysia, and she was really really quite timid. But between camps, we had a day off, I think, or 2 days, and we got to know each other, and we started dating as far as you can date with 80 kids around and other Christians watching you. And she was visiting her aunt and other relatives in Canada, because her mum was Canadian. And she went to a town in Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan?
I've heard Saskatchewan before.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like a state in Canada?
Yeah, it's a prairie state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right slap bang in the middle. Like Manitoba and Saskatchewan are the prairies.
Yeah.
So when you drive, you see about 3 trees in 700 miles.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you go over a hill, you throw a celebration because it's just so flat.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Mm.
At night, the sun sets on the cornfields, and it's just looks like it's all on fire because it's just amber, and it's so it's got its beauty, but it's cold.
Yeah.
And I quite liked Alberta, and I thought, I'll stay here. So she went off to Bible college in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And there's some great names.
Yeah, it sounds a bit made up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's one called Medicine Hat, you know, and three deers and red deer, and all these different places are great. And so she went off and did a Bible college, and I decided that I was going to stay in Sundry And the local youth there didn't have anything to do. And this one Christian had said, there's a pool parlour. Do you want to set it up as a drop-in centre for kids? Because they would always come in, they'd always got their quarter for the pinball. And so I did. I worked for this family that owned it and created like this centre where kids could come. They could talk to me if they wanted to. And we're trying to get some sort of Christian message across to these kids. And I did that. And then I'm sitting at home one day and thinking, when I first met Jane, I thought, yeah, but I'm not ready for marriage. And then I thought, oh, maybe I'll ask her. So I called her up, romantic in me. I called her up and said, what do you think about marriage? And she said, with you? And said, yeah, do you want to get married? And she said, yeah, I do. And I said, well, let's pray about it. And we both prayed about it. It sounds awfully religious. But we both prayed about it and we were convinced that we were meant for each other. So she came 350 k's to where I was, and we got engaged. And she'd been a part of the camping ministry, and I'd stayed doing the camping ministry as well on the weekends. And then she went off back to Bible college, and she comes back, and I decided that I need to move to Calgary. I need to get a proper job and move to Calgary. So I moved to Calgary, and I rented a basement apartment. You know, you live like 6 foot underground. And in winter, it is a bit like being dead. All you see is these windows. Yeah. And we got married, and her mum came over for the wedding. I'd met 2 of her sisters while we'd done some travelling. And her mum came over, and I'd never met my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And she was great. And her aunt and uncle helped us organise the wedding. And he was in the Brethren Church. But this Brethren Church was a real church, and they had ministers and they had teaching and really good, it was about 700 people. And he was an elder, an ex-missionary, and he married us. And we got married in this lodge that was the centre of the camp. Mm-hmm. We got married in May on my mother's birthday, so I wouldn't forget either, or I'd know I'd be in trouble. And normally in May in Canada is beautiful, and a week before there'd been about 3 foot of snow. And so we'd planned an outdoor wedding in an outdoor chapel, and we couldn't get married there, so we had to get married inside. And it all went off, and we had friends that we'd met and friends who'd helped us as we'd come together and stuff, and unfortunately no family. And we sped off to BC, to the Rockies in BC for our honeymoon in a log cabin. Had first night in Calgary, and then we went for about 5 or 6 nights in this rock cabin, and came back and took her mum to the airport because she was going back to Australia. And we decided that, where are we going to live? You know, I said, we didn't really want to live in England, you know. And then we were both really, really happy in Canada, and I loved it. And I loved our church. I loved the scene there and everything. And we got lots of friends through her cousins. She had a lot of cousins, and so church and family was a no-brainer. And I'd always wanted to come to Australia, so we were having these discussions about where we were going to live. And so I think we pretty quickly eliminated England, and we didn't see the point in being living in Canada with family in England and Australia, and how was it going to work? So I agreed. I'd been working in a factory, a sheet metal factory. In Calgary at that time, 1,000 people a week were moving to Calgary because there was all the oil and gas and stuff. And originally when I'd moved to Alberta, I was going to move up to Whitehorse and Churchill and work and get some quick money. because that was what my mate was doing. But I got our different plans. And I was quite happy. I was really settled and really happy. And
this is the theme.
Sorry?
This is the theme. You're like, oh, settled and happy, and then God.
Well, where are we going to go? Yeah. So I agreed to come over here for 6 months. I took 6 months leave of absence. We went to England, and Jane got sick. And again, we were there in October and November.
Yeah.
And she hated it. That's why she's never been back. And I said, you should come back to England and see it when it's really pretty. Nah, she won't go. So we flew back to Canada, picked up the rest of our things, shipped the rest of them off, and came to Australia. So I've been traveling for about 2 days, and the first thing we did was go down Cronulla. And I thought, I love this. I love this. I mean, I'd been skiing and stuff in Canada, but this was better, and it was warm. And we'd only been here about 10 days, and we'd agreed to go and be cooks at a beach mission in up Broom's Head. And so here we are. Jane's mum and sister and another sister had got all the shopping and all the food and the menus, and we went up and cooked. And then the second night, there was like a tail end of a cyclone, and that's what it seemed like. It was a really, really bad storm, and it blew our tent away.
No.
Of all the people on beach mission, one tent got blown away. And people were really good to us, They brought us dry clothes, they helped us set us up, and then after everything dried out, we reset everything up, and we kept cooking, and they kept ministering, and it just really made a good impression. And then we came back down to Sydney after that, and what was I going to do? Jane was a nurse, and while we were in Canada, she'd worked as a nanny. And the first nanny she did, she looked after 3 teenagers, and the guy gave her use of the 4-wheel drive, took her on ski trips, took her on all these different trips, and then the second job she'd had, she looked after a disabled child who was really, really very sick and wasn't expected to live, and he needed round-the-clock attention, and he was a geologist, and he lived on a man-made lake. And he didn't fish, but it was stocked with trout. So he said, I don't fish, but you can come here anytime you want to. So all my weekends, or whenever Jane was working and I wasn't, I'd be fishing, take his little boat out onto the man-made lake. No wonder I love Canada. And so, and I felt God really leading at us, because before we got married, we talked about becoming missionaries, because as I say, she'd got a missionary kid. And I was quite open to that, and came here for 6 months. What would we do? I'd got a job, and I worked it for 5 months, and the week before I was due to be back in Canada, if I wanted my job, I was retrenched. And I wanted to go back to Canada, because I was still, that's where my heart is right now, and she didn't want to go back. She'd regrouped with the family and stuff like that. So the first marriage crisis, and I said to her, "Did you want to go back and stay back all along?" And she said, "Well, I was open to it." So I spent a few years, and I readjusted, and I started to love Australia, and I realised that looking back at Canada was rose-coloured glasses. The winters were really hard. And in Canada at night, and in North America, you have to plug your car in. So you have like an element that's like a kettle element on a long lead. And the element goes into the sump to stop the oil from freezing.
Yeah.
And so I'd get to bed, 20, 30 below, and I said, "Oh, did you plug the car in?" "No." So I'd have to get out of bed, go and plug the car in, and that was just one thing. And, here, 30 degrees, you go to the beach. And so I think I'd become quite accustomed to the lifestyle here. And then I realized that I couldn't really live anywhere else. And there was no point in being away from family. So we settled in Como area, Janelli. And the rest is history. From when I got married, I said to Jane, we discussed what we were looking, and we did proper marriage counselling and stuff, because I was really scared that she would run off with another guy or something would happen.
It's understandable.
Sorry?
I can understand that.
Yeah, and yet she would never do that. And deep down I knew that she would never do that. But I just felt that I got to learn to trust again. And we were discussing marriage, and I just said, look, if you want to get married, that's fine. I'm ready, and I don't see the point in waiting. We're both mature adults, and we've got no family here. And I said, but I have to tell you one thing, that I just don't do high maintenance. And then I looked at her and I said, but you're not high maintenance. She had this real godliness and a real faith that she'd inherited from her parents about trusting everything. They'd been in missionaries in China, and they were kicked out, and friends had been killed, and they'd taken a bunch of school kids over the mountains and out of China, and then they were with OMF, and they decided to stay with OMF, and OMF focused in Chinese-speaking countries. So Jane grew up in Malaysia, and she was quiet, but she had this godliness about her and this trust, and that God was in control. And it was infectious to me, because I wanted it. And in times of crisis, and we've had a fair few issues in our lives that have been pretty deep, she had this trust in God, and nothing could dislodge it. And I think that it's the greatest gift that God's given to me is my wife, because she's unshakable in her faith. And her mum was like that, and her mum was really good to me, and she believed in me, and her dad. And it's pretty awkward meeting your father-in-law when you've been married for 6 months,
Yeah.
And they accepted me. They didn't know who I was or what I was, but they accepted me. And I've learned to pray things through, to accept, and to make the most of what happens while you can. And so through all the trials of our marriage, Jane has been just steady. Of course, I love her and I care for her, and we share things. But after I've been married for a few months, I just thought, gee, I survived a near miss. I'd be divorced if I'd have married that girl, and my life would have been in a real mess. And so I thank God, and I learned to trust God through that, because I would never ever have chosen to go through all the pain and the grief I did, and the loneliness and the isolation. And yet he's given me someone who's 1,000 times better. 1,000 times and some more better. And that's what I love about her, She's made me, or helped me to become. And so did my mother-in-law. And I used to say to my mother-in-law, behind every good man, there's a surprised mother-in-law. But it wasn't true with her, because she was just, she believed in me, and she said, you can do it, And so we had kids, and we started to to discuss and explore missionary opportunities. Are we going for time?
It's probably a good time to wrap it up. Is that you reckon that's the cliffhanger we leave it? Because I feel like we're only halfway through your story.
Yeah, I think so. Because then the next thing that happened was a real game changer.
Ooh, that's a cliffhanger, isn't it?
That is the perfect time to end on this particular part of Dave's story. But I think we'll get you back.
I'd love to come back.
I think
Yeah,
to
we'd love
continue
to have
story,
you
that would be really cool.
As long as I haven't bored everybody, but I just...
Oh, well, too bad.
I'm
Haven't bored me.
I'm here to tell people that being with God and doing what he wants is not boring. And when I thought that, I missed out on life.
Yeah, okay. Well, great. On that bombshell. That was really good. That was really cool, though. So, yeah, we'll be getting Dave back, I think. And just in the interest of time, we'll wrap it up here. But I want to say thank you for this part.
Thank you for having me.
We'll get you back on the next part very soon.
Thanks so much.
That's all right. Thank you, Braden. It's
Thank
good to
you,
have you
Joel.
back. You might
Good to be back.
think about changing your clothes for next week.
We'll see. We'll see. The stars could align.
Too bad I haven't got the old RAF trench coat.
Yeah,
you know?
Oh, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
That would
I
have
don't
been
know. I'll
cool.
have to talk to the wardrobe department.
Yes, that's probably a good point. Yeah, we'll put in a request for next week.
Yep.
But thanks, it's been really great. But we're going to continue this story as we go
for
on.
sure.
But
Thanks.
we'll finish this episode with a one way, and then we'll get you back next week.
Sure.
One
One way.